Hey, how's it going? My name is Albert Huang, aka Fat Hex, and this is Learn How to Dance Liquid, or How to Dance Liquid. This is episode number 6, and for a while now I've been really excited about teaching you how to do what are called splits. So I worked like 3 weeks in a row trying to record a video on how to do splits, and I realized there's just way too much content to cover. I just can't. So I'm going to split it up into 2 parts. The first is all the stuff you need in order to talk about splits, and then I'm going to start talking about splits. Basically, another way to think about what this episode is, or what this episode is, what episode number 6 is about. It's one last overview of all the fundamentals that I've covered so far, right? I mean, we're talking the figure 8, the rolls, the hand wave, the rails, and folds, right? I think those are it. I'm going to just sort of review some of those things, and really, I'm going to really try to address one particular issue, which is what I've been asked a few times now, which is like, great, I got the fundamentals down, I can do in each individual move, like I'm pretty good at this whole rail thing, and I really feel like I have an understanding of the illusion. How do I put them together? Like, how do I like transform this into dancing, right? Because right now it just feels like a bunch of party tricks that I can do. It just feels like I'm running through the motions, but I can't like latch these things together in a way that makes it feel like I'm really enjoying the music, in a way that makes it feel like I can transition from one to another seamlessly. And if I only had 1 minute to tell you, if I only had like 20 seconds to tell you what to do, I would just say, you know what? All you gotta do, I swear to you, is just train your fundamentals. I just promise you that's all you have to do. But luckily I have like 20 minutes to do this in, and I will be talking about a bunch of other random stuff, but it's mostly just learn from your fundamentals is what I really mean to say. Is like really inspect the practice that if you're doing this really well, really think about it. And come up with ways to extrapolate that. And so, today's episode, I'm going to give you a bunch of really great ways to extrapolate that, mostly in aid of getting to a sense of understanding what a split is, which is the next episode, which you shouldn't go to because, yeah, I have not yet prepared you for that. That's what this episode's for. So, in any case, I guess one of the things that people get frustrated with is that when you have these small things, just the space, you're just like dealing with something that's like here, right? I mean, it's like, it's in front of you, it's maybe like within, I don't know, a cubic space of like 3 feet, maybe? You're like, how do, and you go on YouTube and you see these liquid dancers and they're like all over the place. And you're like, how do I get there? How do I like move from this to like, like really crazy large in-your-face things, right? So, the first issue of today, and I think maybe even the only issue of today, is like how to get big, how to really open up your body and use these fundamental pieces to make large, big shapes. So, I'm going to focus pretty much solely on the hand wave and different incarnations of that hand wave, and why that's different modeling, different perceptive models of that hand wave are super useful in thinking about ways to make this thing big. So let's take this hand wave and break it down and do some of the things that I've talked about before, right? Now the hand wave, there are a bunch of different models that I've talked about and how to perceive it. One of those models is that there's a circle here, right? And that circle is what the meeting point of your hands, that's what it's tracing, right? It's tracing this circle. And another way that I've described the hand wave is that you have basically a fold that's going across from wrist to wrist, over and over and over again, right? And I don't know if I actually covered this, but another way that I like to sometimes think about it, and these are things you should kind of be able to figure out if you do the fundamental work, which is basically like having this idea that there's this rail that goes like this, sort of like a ribbon that's being pinned up on a wall in different areas, right? And in between each pin, it sort of like drapes. And then your hand sort of goes across that, right? But instead of your hand going across that, think about that drapery just sort of shuttling across this way. And as it shuttles across, your hands just sort of droop on top of it, if that makes sense. this is actually very, very much similar to the idea that there is a fold going across the shape. It's just a different mental model, and I think it usually is helpful for me because of the way that my brain sort of constructs the impulses behind the two different models, right? The first model being a fold sort of crinkling across the top of it, and the second model being my hands sort of succumbing to gravity across an existing architecture. And those will play out differently, and I'll explain why in a bit. But first of all, we're going to go back to the circle, because I think that's the most useful one for when it comes to thinking about creatively reshaping your liquid, right? So if you have this hand wave here, and I'm going to put that circle sort of square on my face here. You know, the circle's a really great shape to deal with because unlike the other models that we have, it is a two-dimensional shape, and it can be very easily transformed into different versions of that two-dimensional shape, right? So, for example, if we want to elongate that circle up and down, right? So if we have this circle like right around my face, but now I want to elongate it up and down, I know exactly how to do that. It's actually not that hard, right? Surprisingly, as long as I keep the really basic same gestures or the same pieces throughout, then it's pretty straightforward on how to make this larger, right? Or if I want to elongate it instead of up on this axis, I can elongate it this way, right? Which basically just means that I'm sort of like creating more energy in this direction. And once again, not too difficult to do, right? So this is all based on the idea that we have a circle and we can reshape it. So let's just make this circle larger and larger, right? So here we have this circle, and it's very easy to perceive of the circle, the shape of that circle, simply because it's like kind of smallish, and at this size we engage with objects that are about this size on a frequent enough basis so that we will be able to like completely conceive of how big that circle is. But as we get larger and larger, we sort of get to a scale that's like kind of awkward. Like I don't really deal with objects that are this large on a daily basis when they're this close to me, right? And like how large can you get? It's this new question of, and so now I'm just sort of like imagining this really large circle, and I feel like I'm a stupid dancer because the model that I had here, it worked really well because I could see it, I could imagine it. There was an existing sort of architecture in my imagination. But when I get out here, I don't deal with hoops that are like, this large that often. I don't think, at least. That, at least not in the visual way, not in the same way that I'm visually engaging with this model, right? But look at that. I mean, if you think about it, well, you actually do have a model of a circle that you're very, very aware of. It's just not visual. It's more proprioceptive. It's kinesthetic. It's this model. I mean, look at this. I have this really big, beautiful circle simply because I was born. Everybody who was born with two healthy arms is able to make large circles, and they're able to move them around their body with stunning grace. Are they not? Right. So basically, all I'm saying is that you take this circle and you extrapolate it into this large architecture, and you just run your fingertips across that shape. Oh. Feels so good to be out here, doesn't it? Right? Look at how big this liquid is. And if you do this for like 5 minutes, you get tired. But the point is, now you might be a little bit sloppy at this point, and I'll give you a few more tips on how to like maintain this large shape. First of all, let's examine this circle from two different ways. Well, so there was, first of all, that model of how to do the hand wave using the circle. But there are the other two models, which is, one is the fold, and one is that rail, right? And I'm going to, like, use those other two models to explain how this shape really pans out. Let me move my camera a bit so I can stay up above. Let's see here. Is that good? That's awesome. Sweet. Okay, so here we have, when we're doing these circles, on the top end of the circle, what I like to think is that that's the fold action, and on the bottom end, this is the rail action, right? Here is where I'm like carving the bottom of the rail, and here is where the fold is peaking, right? Rail, fold, rail, fold. And the reason I have that model in my brain so heavily ingrained is because I use that when I'm like out here, right? And it's way more useful when you're out here because you have this fold that I think you can start it with the elbow if you want to. And then when you get to the other side, that's when you go into the rail, right? And you have this rail, and instead of having your hands like super close to each other, usually by the time I'm here, my hands are about this far apart. But I would say experiment with how far apart you want your hands to be. I just feel like having there a little bit of distance gives you the flexibility to really do these shapes, right? And look at how awesome this is. Now I have this huge shape, this really big circle, and now I have all this freedom. And I don't need to be looking at it all the time. So here we go. We got the fold up here, fold, 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 and then now we have the rail down here. And I think if I haven't stressed this before, right now, after you do any drill and you feel like you've kind of mastered it, I think that is sort of the time where you should be like, all right, well, maybe I should try practice, leading with my weak hand, because most people, you can see it. Everyone leads with. I mostly lead with my right hand, but it gives me a lot of flexibility when I have the opportunity to split off or to switch off and use my other hand. In any case, that was a small tangent. So now we have this arm circle up here. And I bring the camera down because I want to show you a different arm circle down here. Look at that. Exact same mechanics, right? It's just easier on your shoulders. Your arms won't get as tired. And then you can do this arm circle over here if you want to. This might be a little bit more confusing. Or this arm circle over here. But another thing to note is that if you can sort of transition your arms from one circle to another, you should also be able to do it while you're creating this shape. So here's this arm circle down here, and here, this arm circle up here. And now I'm transitioning between the two. And if you notice, you take two circles and you sort of splice them off of each other. You get, what do we get, folks? We get the figure eight, and we're back to the figure eight, right? A different shape of the figure eight. It's not quite it's not quite this axial figure eight, but it's the same sort of experience, right? Anyway, so now you have this mechanic for being able to get large and being able to move around. And these are all based on those fundamentals that I was talking about before. I probably sound like a crotchety old man when I talk about drill your fundamentals, but I really. Whatever. I mean, do it as long as you want to, and then do this stuff. And when you're doing this big liquid stuff, and you're like, I feel really sloppy over here. I don't understand it. That's when you need to think about your fundamentals again. But if you don't really care about feeling sloppy or whatever, then just go crazy and just have fun on the dance floor, because now you have the ability to make a lot of space. So anyway, going back to the different models, there's that circle, and then there's the fold, and then there's the rail, right? What's cool about the fold and the rail piece of that model is that it gives you the ability to transition into different different modes of transportation, I guess, if that makes sense. So if you're sort of just stuck on the dance floor doing this, and you're like, all right, now I'm bored, but I don't want to just stop and then start doing footwork, right? Or I don't want to stop, and I don't want to do this and then go like this. Right? That's sort of a weird transition to make. What you can do is transition from here to, oh, I'm in rail territory. Let's go with rails. Right? Or, all right, I'm going to just start doing different fold shapes now that I'm over at the top of, right? So, once you go to the top and you're like, oh, folds, then you can say, folds. I'm going to go and do more fold things, right? So, I think it makes sense. Oh, and also you can do the opposite direction, right? If you're in fold territory, and you're like, okay, now we're in the hand waves, which is just a different type of fold. Or if you're in rail territory, it's very, very easy to transition from one to another. And often, actually, it's, right now I'm talking about chunking them off and different cognitive spaces, but eventually you just get to a point where you're like, oh yeah, this is totally like, you move so seamlessly from one to another, you don't really, sometimes you don't catch yourself doing it, I guess. I mean, it just sort of happens only because you've been practicing all those little pieces so much and transitioning back and forth between them so frequently. And so that, that has opened you up in a very new and exciting way. And the next thing that I want to talk about right now for this episode is another fundamental piece that I haven't really touched on in a while, I don't think, which is fixed point, right? Like, when we're dealing in the micro, right? When I'm really close to the camera and we're talking about like individual fingers, right? I mean, I'm like 6 inches from the camera and we can, I can whisper. And so basically, like, look at that, right? Like fixed point is really awesome in this like really small contained space. Because it gives me a way to, circumvent having to learn the muscle memory of doing each individual thing. And instead I can focus on, all right, there's this like bead of energy and it's like passing through space and my hands happen to be in its way, and as the bead passes through my fingers, they deal with it, right? Or they like interact with it in some way. And fixed point like sort of becomes an interesting idea when you're doing with these folds. You can think of that fold being fixed as it's passing through space, or you can think of in the digits thing, you can think of your hand passing through that fixed point, or a fold sort of occurring in that fixed point, which is a rail. A fold being pushed through a fixed point. That's pretty much the definition of a rail. Anyway. What I was getting at was that, like, okay, cool. We have a very clear understanding of how fixed point operates. And I apologize if it's confusing that fixed points can move. But I would just say that those are just, like, very important, significant points of energy. And as they move, everything else just sort of correspondingly transforms around it, right? And the fundamental illusion there is that, like, this is a really complicated gesture, right? I mean, like, this is just really weird. It's just, like, something you don't see in nature. And, in fact, it is easier for your audience member to see that gesture and say, oh, it's not that they've, like, memorized this weird, sophisticated, complicated muscle memory thing. What's really going on is that there's just this, like, there must be some reason that each individual digit is acting in succession in this directional vector, right? So I guess what I'm saying is that, like, your audience is going to say, it is stupid for anyone to spend time learning that. Instead, what must be going on is there is actually something traversing through space through their hands, right? If that's not clear, please add it in the comments, because I don't really know how else to explain that. In any case, I'm going to bring that idea out here on the dance floor in a bigger space. That fixed point thing, I mean, let's talk about, like, so with our rails, right, we have these, like, fixed corner points. Cool, fun. But as you do different, like, rail patterns, let's see, let's get one that's good for the camera. There we go. You'll notice that there are times in the rail pattern where you have this, like, just, like, free horizontal traversal, right? And usually when that occurs, I like to think of the idea of, well, maybe, no, it's not the horizontal. Let's see what I'm trying to do. Look. That's what I'm getting at, right? Is this idea that, like, I'm getting busy. So you have this end, this rail that, like, fixes around this pivot over here, right? And if I want to really sort of follow that through to its if I want to follow this rail through to its like hyperbole, right? If I want to hyperbolize this rail, if I'm going around this thing, I'm going to go all the way around that thing, right? And it's just like this really awkward fixed point that my whole body has to account for. Ugh. So yeah, when you make that really awkward shape, okay, I gotta stop that because I'm really bad with the dizzies. So all I'm saying is that when you make that awkward shape, look at how much space I'm moving across the dance floor, right? And think about like different ways of taking these rails, not only using them. I forgot to like bring up the most obvious point. When you're doing kind of anything and you're doing, here's the shape of a hand wave being in a large circle, guess where the fixed point is? I mean, there already is obviously a fixed point, and this is the default fixed point of every human being sort of as they stand there. It's their center of gravity. I just have this fixed point that's like in my core, right? And then as I move around, that fixed point sort of comes with me. But, as trained dancers, what we can do is we can say, all right, that fixed point, I'm going to take it, and I'm going to displace it, right? And so now my body is like this fluid thing, and then now there's this like new thing, there's this new place that is what is grounding me, right? And if you can use that thing as a way to ground your body, then the rest of your body gets to be this really weird, awkward, fluid thing. And that gives you the ability to really like explore the space. It really gives you the ability to move around and really get out there, I think it's one of those things that people say is that like the beginning dancers, one of those things is the elbows are always too far to the side, and a way to really help you get out is to imagine, that your fixed point is not here anymore. You got to just like abandon that. You got to take that fixed point, put it somewhere else, and then deal with it in a different sort of externalized way. So yeah, I think that should give you a good review of the foundations. It gets you in a larger space with these circles. Transitioning between those circles is a really great way to move around. Trying to reconsider fixed point in a context of how you fit on the dance floor. And I guess, the one thing that I realized while explaining all of this is that like when you're dealing with the fundamentals, you're usually dealing with your visual perceptive abilities, right? To say, I can see a circle, I can see there's a crease, I can see that there's like, this rail that I'm traveling across. But when you start getting bigger, you can't just see everything, right? You just have to sort of feel it. And that's sort of, I can see how that might feel a little daunting at first, but that's why you train those fundamentals, so that you can get to a point where, oh yeah, there's this fixed point thing right here, and it's really convincing to me even though I'm not looking at it. I don't need the visual to keep me engaged. I have the kinesthetic, I have the proprioceptive. And that's what keeps me engaged, I guess. So, anyway, oh my god, I'm so excited, because the next episode is going to be splits, which is very potentially going to blow your mind. Splits are crazy hard, crazy sophisticated, but super simple. There's just so much to talk about. I'm super excited. Tune in next time. And if you have any questions, definitely hit me up in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.